Good evening, folks. We're going to hopefully get through two chapters tonight. We start in Genesis 19 with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then we'll head into Genesis 20. Genesis 20 is kind of a repeat of events, not of the events themselves, but the way they happened a few chapters ago when Abraham and Sarah went down into Egypt. So it shouldn't be too much new information here, but we're going to hopefully cover those two chapters tonight. I got a little bit up here with me playing. She's probably going to be called out in a few minutes anyway. So wait for a few people to get on. Let's see if I can tag some people who normally like to join us, and we'll see if they want to come on. Let's see, there's Brian, and then let's see here, Abby, and Solomon. And if you know some other people who would like to watch and talk about Genesis, you are welcome to tag them in the comments so that they can follow along. Let's see, Michael, I believe, is one. I know a lot of Michaels. There we go. So anyway, welcome aboard. Laurie, welcome aboard. We're studying Genesis. We're making our way through Genesis, and we're studying tonight Genesis 19 and 20. So tonight we're going to get into the fairly famous story of Sodom and Gomorrah. What's interesting is that it wasn't just Sodom and Gomorrah that was destroyed. If you remember back in Genesis 14, there were 5 city-states that were on the plains that Lot was captured along with when they rose up against Chedorlaomer, and God actually had intended to destroy all 5 of them, but because of Lot's actions, one of them doesn't get destroyed. So we'll talk about that when we get there. Chapter 19, verse 1, and again I'm reading out of the King James, but I have the ESV up for just in case there's some archaic stuff that we want to get through and not have to deal with the older English here. And I also have some Hebrew stuff up too. So Genesis 19:1, and there came 2 angels or 2 messengers to Sodom at even, and Lot sat at the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and you shall surely rise up early, and go on your ways. And they said, No, but we will abide in the street all night. Now, at this point, it's evident to me that Lot doesn't understand that these guys are heavenly messengers. He's fearful of them being out all night. He invites them into his home. He shows them hospitality, just as Abraham had. So Lot is still a good man by all accounts, but he's fearful, and we know that he's not as strong in his faith as what Abraham is. Hey, Missy, welcome aboard. Hey, Kimberly. So he's fearful of these guys, and so he says, come on into my house. And they say, no, we're going to stay out in the streets all night. Verse 3, and he pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and he entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. So he's able to convince them. Hi, Taylor, we're studying Genesis tonight. So he's able to convince them to come in. He cooks a meal for them. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house around, both old and young, and all the people from every quarter. So the whole town has come out because these strangers have come into the town, and right after dinner, before they lay down for the night, and they're going to cause some trouble here. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came in to thee this night? bring them out unto us that we may know them. Now, of course, we understand that to know them in the biblical sense means to know them. They're wanting to do what eventually comes to be called sodomy, for this very reason. They're wanting to have adult relationships with them, and it's just the epitome of their wickedness that this is just what they do. That, you got strangers come in. Karis, you don't need to be over here. You do not need to be over here. Go that way.
I know there's a moth.
There's a moth? Okay, well, why don't you go on down and go to bed then? Go on down. Okay, well, then you can't be over here. Okay? Don't come over here. Oh, well, now the moth is over here on my screen, so you can go over there and play. Sorry about that, folks. So anyway, the town wants to know them and wants to do things with them that they just don't. It's gross. I'm just gonna throw it out there. It's gross. So right, knew his wife, exactly so. And we'll see here later in the context that the way that the word know is used here is specific to that context. So in verse 6, and Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him. So he goes outside, closes the door behind him, and he says, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. So these guys are not asking to just introduce themselves. They weren't trying to get to know them as visitors in that sense. Lot knows what they mean. He's like, don't do this wicked thing that you're going to do. And then here's where Lot's faith is shown to be real weak. It's not something I would ever conceive of doing myself. But he says, behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. And so we know here that this idea of knowing them is a specific context. It says, let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do to them as is good in your eyes. I said, you cannot be over here. You do not have a shirt on. Go downstairs. Go downstairs. Karis, you need to go downstairs now. Go on. No, your time is up. Your time is up. You cannot be in front of the camera. You do not have a shirt on. Go downstairs. Go downstairs or you're not going to be able to come up here tomorrow night. Go on. Go on. Hold on, folks. I'll be right back. All right, scared of a moth. Hopefully the flashlight will help on her way to bed. So he says, behold, now I have 2 daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out to you, and you do to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. So he's more worried about taking care of these strangers than his own daughters. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. So they're talking about Lot. They're saying, who's making you judge over us? Who are you to tell us what to do? Yeah, right, exactly. Who's gonna try to have a fight to just meet and greet somebody, right? So they're arguing about Lot, and then they say, now will we deal worse with thee than with them? So there's a threat there. Let these men come out and let us do with them what we want, and then when we're done, we're going to do even worse to you. So they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. But the men put forth their hand. This is talking about the angels. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut the door. So there are a number of people who, for whatever reason, a lot of it today in the modern world, try to downplay this idea of homosexuality. A lot of people who are trying to say that homosexuality is actually okay in the Bible, that there's just certain aspects of it that are not acceptable. And one of the things that they try to do is with Sodom and Gomorrah, they say that it wasn't that they were trying to have sex with them, homosexual activity, because these are all men. It was that they were not being hospitable. No, that makes no sense. That is somebody really working really hard to try to get around what the context of this passage actually says. No, they wanted to bring him out. They wanted to have that which Romans chapter 1 calls unnatural. And yeah, exactly so. Stephen says, and then the men admit that their wanting to know was bad by their use of the worse with Lot. And so, they know it's wrong. They know it's bad. And they're like, look, we're going to do what we want with these guys, and then we're going to do worse to you. So there's no getting around this idea that these guys were wanting a specific thing in a simple reading of the text, unless you're just incredibly naive or you're really wanting some other conclusion. The simplest, easiest understanding of this is homosexuality. So, and since the flood, this is easily the worst case of sin that we see in terms of the wholly wicked, that every thought and intent is wicked and stuff. These guys are hearkening back to the wickedness before the flood. And so we can see here that homosexuality is included in that kind of wickedness, because that's the sin that's highlighted, although I'm fairly certain that that's not the only sin they committed. So anyway, verse 11, and they, that is the angels, the messengers from God, smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So they're blind, they can't find the door anymore. And the men, that is these celestial messengers, said unto Lot, have you here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons and thy daughters, and whatsoever you have in the city, bring them out of this place. So they're saying, hey, we're about to destroy the city. Do you have any family? You need to go gather them up. Everybody's blind outside. Go gather your family and get them out of here. And then they say in verse 13, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of Jehovah, and Jehovah hath sent us to destroy it. So Lot went out, so he goes back outside the house. Remember, they're all blind now. And he speaks unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, up, get you out of this place, for Jehovah will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So he's got these guys that have, according to the King James, and it's a little bit different here, because in the ESV it says that who were to marry his daughters. So these guys might be betrothed to the two daughters that Lot has inside the house that have never known a man. And then the way the King James reads is Lot has two more older daughters that were outside with their husbands. So they're sons-in-law, but remember, under the Hebrew law, the betrothal, they're considered already family. So you can take that however you want to mean. But the sons-in-laws, they don't listen. They said, but he seemed as one that mocked, or that was crazy, that he was jesting or joking to his sons-in-law. They didn't know what was going on. Yeah, that's a great point, Stephen. They were wearied trying to find the door, even though they were blinded. They were driven to get these strangers and do things with them, that instead of being done, oh my gosh, we're blind, let's go home, they continued to try to get in. And you're exactly right. That's a great observation there. So verse 15, and when the morning arose, the messengers hastened Lot, saying, arise, take your wife and your two daughters which are here. So that sounds to me, the way that the King James words it, that there were two other daughters and two sons-in-laws. because it says, "Thy two daughters which are here, lest you be consumed in the iniquity of the city." So iniquity, I like this word iniquity. It's a little bit more involved than the word sin. Iniquity is the sin, but it's also like the consequences of the sin, if you will. If you and it goes together. So if you're talking about the sin, what it is sin leading to sin, is what I understand the way that the Bible uses iniquity here. But in this case, what they're talking about is you need to go. Lot wasn't going to be consumed by the corruption because the cities were about to be destroyed, but he was about to be consumed by the consequences of their sin if he had stayed. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his two daughters, and Jehovah being merciful unto him, and they brought him forth and set him outside the city. So what I'm picturing here is basically teleportation. You have Lot's kind of hemming and hawing and piddling and not wanting to leave, and when he does this, the angels basically just grab him by the hand and poof, they're outside of the city. And they're like, no, Jehovah's really about to destroy the cities. You need to not be in here. So verse 17, and it came to pass, when they had brought them forth abroad, that he said, escape for thy life, look not behind thee. That's a command. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my lord. Now, that word there, in 1918, I believe is Adonai, and is just a kind of a title type thing. I don't believe that's Jehovah. No, it's not even that. It's Adon. So Adon is Lord, Master, Sir. It's basically, it's not even Adonai. It's just kind of like we would say Sir or Mister or whatever. So, yeah, definitely, Stephen. I'm glad to. I've just read the two. They're not synonymous, but they're very thickly, heavily related. But I think iniquity goes further, and it has to do with how the iniquity would bring about further corruption. And so iniquity seems to be a lot stronger than just the individual. Sin is a personal thing. It's a thing that you do in violating God's will. But iniquity seems to be you sinning, and then consequences of that. One of the consequences of that is that you teach others to sin. And so and that there's consequences of that. So anyway, yeah, it would be a great study, maybe a good article for my webpage too. So anyway, they say to Lot, we're going to destroy the city and all the plains, and Lot says, please don't do it. Behold, now thy servant has found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life, and I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. So Lot is afraid again. He's very fearful. This is kind of the converse of Abraham. So he doesn't want to go in the mountains because he's afraid that something bad might happen to him up there. He says, behold now, this city is near to flee unto, and this is a little one. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. So he's like, look at this town over here. It's a little bitty. Let me go there. And he's talking about one of the 5 towns that were in rebellion to Chedorlaomer. And he said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. And so the angel says, I'm not going to destroy it. Jehovah has heard you, has accepted this request that you've made, and I'm not going to destroy it. You can go there. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou become thither. Therefore the name of this city was called Zoar. So remember, again, Moses is writing this well after the fact. This is something that happened a few centuries prior. We have the names of the cities already given because Moses knows them, but in this case here, we have the naming of the city is called Zoar because it literally means insignificant. Therefore, the name of the city was called Zoar. And so, even though we had the name prior, we had it because Moses is writing after the fact here. And then it says, the sun was risen up on the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. So it took him a day to get there, and it was morning. Then Jehovah rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew up on the ground. So looks like I'm going to have to stop at the end of 19 here. I might even have to stop before that. So, see here. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities that grew up on the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And then Abraham, in verse 27, got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before Jehovah. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as smoke of the furnace. So here's the famous story of Lot's wife. She doesn't obey, and she's immediately dealt with. This is kind of like Uzzah and the Ark of the Covenant. Doesn't obey, consequences are immediate. And so we kind of have a panning away here of the scene, and Abraham gets up that same morning where Lot's coming into Zoar, and apparently Jehovah is still there, and or at least he's at the same spot where he had been talking to Jehovah, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and he sees the destruction. So anyway, I'm gonna have to stop there. Again, poop rules my house, so I have to go take care of my little one. So what I will do is tomorrow I will pick up in verse 29 with Genesis 19. Sorry to cut it short, but that's such as life, right? Being a dad. Hope you guys will join me tomorrow night. So, powerful against Aryans and civilians. Jehovah from Jehovah, 1924. Did I miss a verse? Oh, I'm not sure what you're saying, but I'll catch it in the text, Stephen, or you can message me later. Anyway, y'all have a good night.